Today I wanted to cover a rather interesting topic, and that topic is the Chinese government or a large company involved with perhaps the Chinese government wanting to buy Steinway? And the answer to that is quite possibly, and I'm going to talk about why in this video. Now, when you think of Steinway, you probably think of the ultimate piano, the piano that's in concert halls and recording studios, and it's incredibly famous all over the world. When people think of pianos, they think of Steinway. And you might think, why is Steinway being sold? If they're the cream of the crop of pianos, they should be untouchable. But there's actually an interesting backstory to what happened to Steinway and why they're in the position to be sold. So let's talk about that. During the 1900s, in the early 1900s, Steinway was coming up with all of these wonderful innovations and inventions in the piano industry that continue to be used to this very day. The idea of stringing the bass strings over the tenor strings to make them longer and give them a fuller sound, known as overstringing or cross-stringing. Steinway invented that back in the late 1880s. And it's been used in pianos ever since. It's an undeniably amazing invention in the piano industry. And then around in the 30s, Steinway also came up with the accelerated action, which they have used in their pianos ever since. And some people like the accelerated action and other people dislike it. I personally find it to be a very nice action. I prefer the Renner action, a German action. It has a more substantial feel, but the accelerated action is a very nice action, especially when it's well regulated. It's very light and it's very easy to play. So during this time, the 1930s and the golden age of pianos, Steinway was untouchable. They were truly the king of pianos. Everyone wanted Steinway. They were completely unbeatable. No one else was really as good as Steinway during this time. But during the 60s, this started changing. In the early 60s, Steinway once again wanted to make another innovation in the piano industry, and they decided that using Teflon bushings in the action would make it play smoother and be much easier to play. And this in itself was a good idea, and they did it for the right reasons. They were trying to make the piano even better. But the Teflon bushings had some issues. They would make clicking sounds, and people started to dislike the idea of the Teflon actions. And interestingly enough, my parents in the 80s went into a Steinway dealer looking to buy a piano. And my mom sits down at a piano and starts playing it, and she hears clicking noises. And she tells the guy at the showroom, he says, "Oh, go to this other piano, you won't hear it." And she sits down and plays that one, and she also hears the clicking. And that sound was the Teflon action. Now, I myself have actually played an untouched Steinway that had Teflon bushings, and I didn't hear any kind of an issue whatsoever, and the piano played fantastically. So whether there was a major issue or not, the point is that Steinway's reputation was heavily damaged. And on top of the fact that the Teflon actions were unreliable and disliked, Steinway actually completely went over to the Teflon action. They didn't have a line of Teflon action pianos and a line of traditional action pianos. They completely abandoned the felt bushing actions in their pianos and went entirely to the Teflon and refused to move on from Teflon actions for 20 years. With Steinway weakened and their Teflon action making them be disliked by the general public and piano players, this really gave other companies the advantage to catch up to Steinway and become as good as them. During this time period, Baldwin was really giving Steinway a run for their money. Baldwins were becoming much more popular at the time, and they were being used in concert halls, and people were just really liking them. They were well-built pianos with a Renner action and no Teflon issues when clicking, and Baldwin pianos from this time period are still considered to be wonderful pianos. They're absolute workhorses, and they really never die. It's quite amazing. After Steinway realized they were making a grave mistake with this Teflon action, that their reputation was being seriously damaged, they went back to their old ways of using felt bushings with the regular accelerated action, and everything should have returned to normal. Steinway should have went back to being the top line of pianos, and they should have been well respected for the rest of their existence. But this wasn't quite true. Steinway still are very respected, but they're still having issues. Ever since they've recovered from the Teflon issue in their actions, they've been suffering from consistency errors, particularly with the 6th and 7th octaves of the piano. And when I selected my personal Steinway here, this is a 1995 New York Steinway D, I wanted to make sure that this region of the piano was strong. This is a very important area of the piano. And the area in my piano is strong, but what's interesting, and it's an interesting thing that Steinway does, is the action was very poorly regulated, and by all signs, it had never been touched since it was new, and the piano had been played very, very little since it had been bought in 1995. So it's possible that the action might have even come this way from the factory. And it's an interesting thing that Steinway does, is that they basically just ship the pianos out to the dealer and rely on the dealer to regulate the action and tune the piano and work on any voicing or any other kind of issues the piano may have, which other piano manufacturers don't do. And this is part of the reason why Steinway pianos can be very inconsistent, particularly with perhaps regulation, because the dealer might not have time to regulate the piano, so this one might be light, that one might be heavy. It's a bit of an issue. Another interesting detail that Steinway completely missed, particularly on my piano, but most likely on many others, was there was a massive amount of sawdust in the key bed, and this sawdust could have potentially gotten inside of the action or caused some kind of a buzz or some kind of strange thing like that to occur. And it's just kind of an interesting detail that they completely left out. And also, like I said, the action was very poorly regulated by all accounts. Directly from the factory, it came this way. And this was really the case during the 80s and 90s, and I believe it's a lot better today. The actions are more consistently light and smooth, but it was an issue then. As an example of this inconsistency, I have an interesting story to say. I once went to a Steinway factory store, which of course should have the best pianos that Steinway has to offer. And there were two Steinway Bs, the 7-foot model, sitting side by side in a small room. One of them was quite nice. It had a very nice sound and it was very, very well rounded. But the other piano had basically a completely dead soundboard, and that 6th and 7th octave that I mentioned earlier was completely flat. It was just, it had very, very little sustain to it at all. And why this piano left the factory, I have no idea. There should be some kind of a quality control here, and this might be an extreme example of it, and maybe perhaps somehow it slipped through, but pianos like this shouldn't be escaping the factory. They should, take them back and do work on them to really improve the pianos and make them the best that they possibly can be before they ship them out and let people buy them. Longtime viewers of the channel will be familiar with the video series I did several years ago called The Musical Safari, where I traveled all the way across America checking out piano stores and also piano factories. I visited the Charles Walter Piano Factory, a small factory in Indiana, and I was given a guided tour of the factory by the owner's daughter. I visited the Mason and Hamlin factory in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and was given a guided tour of the factory by the owner's son. We tried to visit the Steinway factory in New York, but we were basically told no. We were told there was a 6-month waiting period where you had to sign up, and then Steinway would give you the date where you had to show up and be there to take a tour of the factory. And if we wanted to buy a piano and select one at the factory showroom, we would have to essentially purchase a piano, sight unseen, and give them a massive amount of money for a piano that we didn't know how good it was. We didn't know what it looked like. What if we showed up there and they also said there were only going to be 1 or 2, maybe 3 concertgrands to choose from? And what if we had showed up and it was white or something weird like that, or we didn't like the way it played or the way it sounded? Of course, Steinway had consistency errors. What if all 3 of them I disliked? I would have had to buy one of them. And they're kind of like horror stories of people who signed up to select a Steinway and were basically forced, because of this rule where you had to buy the piano sight unseen, to buy a piano they were incredibly unhappy with, and then several years later that got resolved by buying a Hamburg Steinway, but it was pretty crazy. That's not how a business should be operated. It's not how the other American piano manufacturers run their businesses, and it's not how Steinway should run their factory. It's kind of like an elitist thing of, it's just not right. The final thing that I know of that is putting the nail in the coffin for Steinway is dealer territories. And what do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is if I wanted to go buy a brand new Steinway today, I would have to buy it from the closest dealer to me, even if I didn't like the pianos that that dealer had, or he was more expensive than a dealer who was farther away, or something like that. And it's not the way business should be done. We ran into issues several years ago when we were running the In the Search of the World's Greatest Pianos series, and I would do videos on these phenomenal pianos, and everyone would say, when are you choosing a piano? When are you buying one? All kinds of stuff like that, and we were trying. There were several pianos that we were looking at that we had great deals on and all kinds of stuff, but because of this dealer territory issue, we were not able to buy a piano from a specific dealer. We had to buy it from our closest dealer, and it's not just an issue with Steinway. Kawai, I know for a fact, does this as well, and most likely all the large high-end dealers do this as well. Now, if you're a low profile customer, you could probably sneak into a dealer who's outside of your area and buy a piano. But since I'm a relatively high profile customer, I do YouTube videos on the pianos and they got relative success, and the companies knew about me and they knew that the piano was going to go into a recording studio and we'd do videos on that and it would probably become rather popular. They just wanted to have control over who I bought the piano from, which really is not right. In one instance, I had selected a brand of piano that I wanted to buy, and we went into the dealer and actually made an agreement on the price of the piano we were going to buy and the model and everything, and it was all set to go. However, the senior vice president of this company stepped forward and disliked our deal, even though we were buying the piano for $5,000 more than we knew someone else had bought the same model piano. And in fact, in one instance, the senior vice president wanted me to pay $35,000 more than this other person had paid, simply because I was higher profile and it would possibly get out at some point in the future that piano prices are negotiable. Yes, piano prices are negotiable. When you walk into a piano store and you see the list price of $250,000, that's not how much you need to pay for the piano. Piano prices are negotiable. In the end, I truly wish the very best for Steinway. I think that the company has a massive amount of potential, even though they already are quite successful and very well known, and I really hope that whoever buys the Steinway company, whether it's a company in China or whoever it may be, that they really do the very best that they possibly can with Steinway, and they take the fame and the prosperity of the Steinway name and just take it to a whole nother level. I think it's completely possible that if the company that buys Steinway is well managed and listens to consumers and what they want, that Steinway could still remain an excellent quality piano. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you found it interesting or entertaining. I really hope you do. If you want, you can go check out my channel. I have lots of videos on my channel about pianos and playing them. I do lots of reviews on various pianos, and hopefully you can go check out that stuff. And if you like it, you can think about subscribing, and if you do, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.